Alright guys, TacticalRab again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. One of the craziest days of Rostermania in recent memory unfolded before our very eyes last night, and it does not seem to be going away. Dashy says, what have I done? With reportedly up to 6 teams blowing it up going into the Esports World Cup in just a couple of weeks' time. Some of these teams, we know who they are and what they're going to do. There's been some confirmations yesterday and more certainly on the horizon. What does that mean for all of the chaos currently happening, especially when rumours started to emerge that Atlanta FaZe, they might be getting involved as well. What happens next? Very much interested your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Let's dive right in. OpTic won the championship and, well, everything has trickled down from there over the last couple of days. The World Cup's happening in a couple of weeks' time. The big rumour initially was that not much would be able to happen between now and then. There was only going to be a couple of changes that we saw. Shotzzy, though, tweeted out, here we go. Rostermania is well underway. So before we get into actually what's happened, I wanted to go through what the rules currently are, what the theories currently are as to why we are seeing this, because there was a rumour that the teams had 1 day, 24 hours after champs to make any changes, and that they were only able to make 1 change per team maximum. Now that does seem to be a rule if the team is under contract, but for many of the teams out there, certainly a team like the Ravens, and there's some discussion on why this is the case, it's Ravens again, who guessed, but there's other teams in this position as well, that the player contracts they signs effectively expired as soon as champs ended, and as a result those players are free. So the 1 change rule doesn't apply for them. Now it does seem to apply for a team like Cloud9, who seemingly have their contracts or their players under longer term deals, so they, it seems, Cloud9 only allowed to make a 1-man move. But if a player is out of contract, then it's free game, and therefore we are seeing multiple changes happen up and down the field right now. aBeZy says, I would say that there are 5 or 6 teams likely making changes for the World Cup, and we can theorise over the coming minutes who those 5 or 6 are. 3 or 4 of them we know. The other 2, who knows? aBeZy says, as I always say, be careful, right? Be careful, aBeZy. He's done it again. And there also could be more. Now, it is inevitable that after the World Cup, there will almost certainly be more drama, more roster changes, but certain teams that know they've got no realistic chance right now, they are going to do something to at least give themselves a chance at the World Cup in a couple of weeks' time. Now, the big teams, in my opinion, are unlikely to make changes yet, just because if you're a big team trying to make what would be a big signing, it's not something that you can easily do in the course of a couple of days. There might be buyouts involved, there might be big contracts to be signed. It's also a big decision. What sort of contract do you sign? Is it like a month-long contract that just covers the World Cup, or is it going to be a 2-year deal? Right, especially if some of the big names are getting involved, it's something that probably requires more discussion and can't really be resolved in a couple of days. But aBeZy says the roster lock apparently is actually tomorrow, which means that we had all of yesterday for all this chaos to unfold, all of tonight for more chaos to unfold, and then tomorrow for it to conclude. And there seems to be, there's wiggle room as well. There's even beyond July the 3rd, there is potentially wiggle room if EWC approves of changes. Understandable though, because everyone needs a visa to make it happen. So even after July the 3rd, it's still possible you could get something done. As I say, I think it's doubtful that we see any of the really big teams make moves here, but who knows what happens at the moment. So up to 6 CDL teams, and that also means that likely many of the Challengers teams that qualified are going to be making changes as well. There have been rumours about the Omit team that qualified, right? So that being Vivid, Mac, Craze, and Mamba. Mamba was, I mean, Vinny Gage was tweeting all sorts of stuff and then deleting it, so I'm not taking anything he says with any sort of credibility, but he said that Mamba was going to Rocker, then he said that Mamba was going to Toronto. I don't know what's actually going on over there, but I wouldn't be surprised if those guys are at least getting targeted by pro teams looking to make changes right now. There's also rumours about what Falcons are going to do, involving more than a 1-man change, because of course there's been some discussion around Sib, whether they could get him off Cloud9, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen for the reasons that we're about to discuss. But in the case of the Ravens, the contracts expired after champs, hence we're getting some of the madness that we are presently experiencing. So that is the introduction to what's happened last night and why we're seeing what we're seeing. Now let's see what actually happens. There's plenty to go through. Starting with Linz. He used to play for Gentlemates at the start of the season. He's been off the roster for some time, but he's been on the bench. Now he's officially been released. Little surprising to me. I thought they might bring him back and actually form a French team for the World Cup, but it doesn't seem like that's what's going to happen. I imagine LAG Gentlemates are making changes for the World Cup rather than the FeLo, Lunarz, Johnny and Kismet team that they had and was terrible and, you know, right now they seem to be set to continue with, but there was confirmation that they are going to be changing their coaching staff around, that Real and Marky B are out the door, and that Vios and Co are going to be coming back in. So probably that implies roster changes happening there as well. But the one thing that's been confirmed is Cloud9. Now, Linz, by the way, is qualified for the World Cup. He's on Team War with Assault and Diamondcon and those guys. So he could still play for them. He could get poached. I mean, who knows what's going to happen. Cloud9, Capsidal is gone. Feel kind of bad for Cap. I think he did a respectable job in the team, but I understand why they're making this move now because, frankly, that team all season should have been better than they were. Capsidal did a reasonable job coming in, but they've decided that they can drop him because they're going to sign Gwinn. And this was the opportunity that became available. I think Gwinn, it could be perfect timing for him to manage to get himself out of the Ravens situation because all their contracts seemingly have expired, and as a result, Gwinn is free to go. Cloud9 called him up and said, hey, do you want to play for us instead? We can drop Capsidal, bring you in. So how about that team for the World Cup? On paper, they're definitely something to think about. Kremp's been very good. They've got Spart there, and look, I know that they're pretty good friends, Kremp, Spart, and like I think as a team culture, it's a pretty good spot. I do wonder, Cloud9, if they could have made more than a one-man move, whether they might have done, because of course Spart only came in for Attach, and well, Capsidal came in for Mac. They weren't really any better. But Sib and Kremp were, look, Sib had an underwhelming year, really, given his level, but we can still see some potential there. I think all year they should have been better than they were. So a Sib, Gwinn, Kremp and Spart team, you know, it's something to think about. It could potentially be pretty scary, and I think it might be, well, probably a good idea for Gwinn to get out of there, as it were, right? Gets out of the Ravens, gets into Cloud9. It's probably going to be a positive thing for him in his career, depending on the type of contract that he signs, whether he's now signed again to another long-term deal, or whether it's only a short-term contract after which he can decide where he goes next, which is probably in his best interest, to be honest. Of course, there was the other rumour around whether Sib could go. Everyone has been linking Sib to the Falcons, but if that's going to happen, it's probably not going to happen now or yet, would be my, theory on the matter anyway. Maybe Falcons could make it happen. Maybe they will in a few weeks' time. But there would be a buyout involved. There'd be negotiations. I don't know if there's really the time frame to do it. And Falcons could probably just go out and get somebody else if they want to try and level up their roster for the World Cup at least, and then see what happens after that. But if Gwynn's leaving the Ravens, what about the rest of the guys? And apparently, basically everyone is going to be out of there. So we know that Rex is going to be gone. As I say, all their contracts are up anyway. Rex is out, Cobra is in. That's the big rumour. Now, TJ, according to the reports of last night from Ronnie, he also is likely to leave the team. It seems that Slasher is going to be the only man left who achieved the top 8 finish, got bombed out double first rounded at the World Championship, and TJ also apparently is going to be out the door. So we're talking Slasher, Cobra. Rumour has it that Afro might be back, which would be, I think, really exciting. He didn't qualify for the World Cup with his team Notorious, but he's been so good at this game this year. It was a sad idea that he wasn't going to be competing at the World Cup, I thought. So if Afro's coming into the Ravens again, a couple of years after he was on when it was back in London, I think that's a really cool story. So Slasher, Afro, Cobra, and they'd need a fourth. Could still be TJ, but apparently not. It could be someone like Beans, because this was the big bombshell of last night, that Toronto have decided that Beans is a UFA. Now, just to keep in mind, with Toronto, we see this type of stuff from time to time. Last year, Insight, let's not forget, was a free agent, and then he was back, right? So this does happen sometimes, but unrestricted free agent from Beans either means that his contract was simply over at this point, or it means they've decided not to extend it, and if they've decided not to extend it, they're likely looking to make a change. Now, this was a big deal because, look, was Beans to me kind of underwhelming this year compared to where I thought he might be? No, I don't think Beans is the best player in the world, but I thought that he would, I think he's a solid player. I think he's a middle-of-the-pack player. He's talented, and maybe he doesn't make the best decisions all the time, and maybe the Mercules drama got to him and the team. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. But I think Beans is a solid asset. And this season, was he better than Insight? I think, the numbers would probably tell you yes, although CleanX might tell you no. And that is the big rumor about this at this point, because Beans is now gone. Octane says, oh, we're tweaking. I think probably about this situation. EasyMax sent me this yesterday, which is just the relative KDs and stats and everything between the two ARs. And, based on the numbers, obviously Insight plays a different role to what Beans does. And it's not like Beans was great, but if you look at Beans' damage rating, he was actually in the 92nd percentile. Like, his damage, as is typically been the case, is one of the very best in the entire league. In terms of assists per 10 minutes, he's right up there. So is Insight, to be fair. But damage per 10 minutes, again, he's right up there too in hardpoint overall stats. So, the edge in terms of who was the better AR this year certainly goes to Beans. I think there's no real doubt about that. But we know that CleanX and Insight have been a duo for a long time, but many people, of course, are looking at this and saying, damn, they might have dropped the wrong AR, they've made the wrong call. Could they bring it back maybe? I mean, look, we've seen what's happened before, but it seems like Toronto, Mercules broke them, and now they're blowing it up. So I don't know whether we're going to see a similar tweet from Insight. We may, like we did last time out, but for now, anyway, Toronto are looking for a new player. Beans is the one going to be gone. So where does Beans go? Is it going to be back to the Ravens with the guys we just mentioned? Possibly. Could Falcons say, hey, Priester, Nasties, whatever, we'll bring in Beans for the World Cup? That's now an option that was not on the table, 24 hours ago, but is now on the table because of this tweet late last night. And then, of course, Toronto need a fourth. So who are they going to get? Like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Real on the Heretics team, of course, who had a great season, but could some of those guys get poached? Renkor's English is pretty good. Real's English is pretty good. I don't know. It's something to think about. Let's not forget Toronto last year were interested in Real. Like, they nearly signed him before I think they went and got JoeDeceives. So just something to keep in mind. Of course, he tweets this out, but everyone's engagement farming last night. Nastie says Rostermania is always entertaining. Ghosty says, I'm sure it is, buddy. Now, a Surge getting involved? I don't know. We talked about 5 to 6 teams potentially getting involved in this Rostermania period. Let's go through who we know so far. Toronto certainly getting involved, that's 1. Ravens getting involved, that's 2. Cloud9 getting involved, that is 3. I mean, who else? LAG, presumably. I'm sure they're going to do something. You would think that's probably 4. Falcons maybe is 5, but we don't really know what they're going to be doing yet. So then who have we got left, right? Boston, I'm sure, are very likely to stick as it stands. Rocker might be another one, like that might bring us up to the number expected. I'm not expecting the top teams to make changes, certainly not yet, but I do certainly expect that after the World Cup in a couple of weeks' time. And then who else could we throw in? Maybe a Heretics, I don't know. Like, could be Surge. Would I be surprised if Surge make a change at some point over the next 6 weeks? No, to be honest. Not because it's necessarily they want to make a change. It's because it's plausible that somebody gets poached or someone gets an offer and the chaos involves all the teams. Who knows what happens? But I think for now, you'd expect that Surge would be totally fine. So that is the main chunk of the drama. But then we've got to talk about this team. And look at these lineman cards. The most remarkable thing about these lineman cards is, certainly because Simp has a 58 overall, they literally had the farm series. They got to play Ravens, the worst team there. Like, they got to farm Ravens for some stats, and yet the Tiny Terrors ended with some of the worst numbers I've ever seen in my life. So it's just very confusing. Drazah had the worst control KD of an AR in the entire tournament. Just a very strange tournament for FaZe, and it seems very difficult to imagine that after coming top 6 at Champs last year with this team and top 6 again, that they can possibly keep this team together. I think after the World Cup, I'm expecting a change with FaZe, 90% likelihood. I would be surprised if they stick. Even if they win the World Cup, I'd be surprised if they stick. But to change before the World Cup is a big call if they were to do so. And also, if they were to do so, what would they actually do? Who could they get? Because Thieves aren't going to make a move yet. OpTic certainly aren't going to make a move, probably at all, but certainly not yet. Obviously, if Simp becomes available, then it changes the game just a little bit. At least you have to have a little think about it. And we'll probably talk about that in due course as well, because there have been some rumors about that floating around last night. There was also another rumor that aBeZy and JoeDeceives are like wanting to be a duo or something. So I don't know. There is a theory that if you are going to make a change before the World Cup, maybe you say, all right, Drazah, or even all right, Cell, but probably Drazah, been a pleasure, you're out, Simp's going to be our flex, and we're going to bring in another sub, like bring in a JoeDeceives. And, if you're going to do that, then you're probably not going to necessarily want to do that entirely for next season. Maybe you will, who knows? But if you know that you're going to blow it up as FaZe, if you know that after the World Cup you're not going to say the same team, maybe there's an argument to say that we should just do it now, at least get to try something else. I don't know, just something to think about. FaZe tweet out, I don't know, anime gif number 347, like it's just another one. Dashy then says, what have I done? Now, this I thought was hilarious for multiple reasons. What have I done is Drazah's whole gimmick, right? So Drazah's been tweeting this out for years now. He actually has done it 6 times, and these are the examples of when he's tweeted, what have I done over the last couple of seasons? And yeah, he said it multiple times over the last couple of months. Typically, when OpTic were terrible, Drazah would tweet it out because he was like, oh, the CEO, he's broken OpTic or whatever. So I thought it was a great get back here from Dashy, trolling him and trolling everyone by saying, what have I done, right? Like, I win champs. And then guess what? FaZe, probably not FaZe. I don't think he's talking about FaZe. I know that some people have looked at this and said, is Dashy implying that he's broken FaZe? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Tweet your thoughts in the comments. There are, of course, murmurs around this potential FaZe situation. I think on this one, time will most certainly tell. I don't know, what's going to happen or what's going to happen next. K-Sun then says, dealing with esports things, see you tomorrow. So, who knows? But we obviously know what is happening for sure, and there have been murmurs around FaZe doing something. Simp even came out and did a tweet and said, I couldn't tell you what happened. I was not the last in scrims, I promise you. One event doesn't define you, though. It is what it is. I will be better. He doesn't say, we will be better. He doesn't say, oh, the team's going to come back stronger. He's like, look, I'm going to turn it around. Now, look, Zuma came out and said, as far as he understands, the team's going to stay the same for the World Cup. So for now, I think that's probably what it is, but that does not mean that the other teams around the league aren't going to make some serious changes. So that's where we're going to leave it for this morning. We'll be back this afternoon, I'm probably sure, to talk about some more. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. You're going to want to do that. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
But no, guys, FaZe, as far as I'm concerned, FaZe is sticking for EWC. I just don't know what's going to happen after EWC, bro. I'm a little concerned because obviously FaZe, they're in a rough patch, and they got a couple players who are free agents. So I wouldn't be surprised if FaZe is making changes either. I would not be surprised if FaZe made some changes, bro. I would not be surprised. You know what I'm saying? I will not be surprised, guys. I will not.